You've been told the Great Pyramid was built by slaves, whipped under the desert sun, dying by the thousand. It's one of the most famous images in all of history, and it is almost completely wrong. The people who raised the pyramids were not slaves. They were skilled, paid, well-fed Egyptians who lived, worked, and were buried in the shadow of the monuments they built. This is what a single day on the greatest construction site of the ancient world was actually like. So where does the slave myth come from? Partly from Hollywood, and partly from the Greek writer Herodotus, who visited Egypt 2,000 years after the pyramids were finished, and wrote down the legends he was told. For centuries, that story stuck. It took modern archaeology, digging in the sand beside the pyramids, to finally overturn it and reveal who these builders really were. The proof lies just south of the Great Pyramid. There, archaeologists uncovered an entire lost town. Bakeries, breweries, storerooms, and dormitories built to house and feed the workforce. And nearby, they found the workers' own cemeteries. Ordinary laborers, buried with care for eternity. Slaves are not given a town with fresh bread and their own tombs. These were valued people. The workforce was brilliantly organized. The men were split into teams, and we know this because they painted their team names onto the stones. Friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkora. These crews competed with one another, hauling and setting blocks in a kind of fierce, proud rivalry. They weren't a faceless mass of suffering. They were units with identities and something to prove. Our Builder's Day begins before sunrise with the fuel of the Pyramid Age, bread and beer. Egyptian beer was thick and nourishing, almost a liquid bread, and it was handed out daily as part of the ration, along with onions, fish, and loaves baked by the hundred in the workers' bakeries. This was not a starvation diet. It was the food of a respected workforce. Astonishingly, we even have their attendance records. On flakes of limestone, overseers noted who turned up and who missed work, and why. The reasons are wonderfully human. One man was off brewing beer, another was ill, another was stung by a scorpion, one was simply lazy. These tiny notes reach across 45 centuries and turn anonymous laborers back into people. Then, the heavy work. Teams dragged limestone blocks, each weighing more than 2 tons, on wooden sledges. To cut the friction, a worker poured water onto the sand ahead of the runners, a trick that nearly halves the effort, and one we can still see painted on Egyptian tomb walls. Up great ramps of earth and rubble the blocks climbed, set into place by hand. How did they cut the stone at all? With surprisingly simple tools. Soft limestone was carved with copper chisels and wooden mallets. For the harder granite of the inner chambers, workers used balls of dolerite, a stone tougher than granite, pounding away for days to shape a single block. Levers, ropes, and sledges did the rest. No power tools, just patience, muscle, and ingenuity multiplied across thousands of hands. The scale is almost beyond belief. The Great Pyramid contains over 2 million blocks, raised in around 20 years. That means setting a block every few minutes for 2 decades. There was no magic and no aliens. There was something far more impressive. Organization on a scale the world had never seen, marshalling thousands of people toward a single, staggering goal. And the precision is staggering. The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an error of just a fraction of a degree. The Egyptians had no compass. They likely read the stars, tracking the rising and setting of a star to find true north. A people we imagine as primitive aligned a 6 million ton building to the heavens. more accurately than many cathedrals built thousands of years later. And these workers were looked after. Their skeletons tell the story. Bones with healed fractures, carefully set, and even signs of successful surgery. Injured men were treated and allowed to recover. Beyond bread and beer, the crews were supplied with meat, cattle, sheep, and goats, driven to the site in large numbers. You do not feed prime beef to people you intend to work to death. Above the laborers stood an army of specialists, scribes tracking supplies, expert masons dressing the stone, surveyors aligning the pyramid to the stars with breathtaking precision. At the very top was the architect. For the Great Pyramid, that may have been a man named Hemiyumu, a relative of the king, whose statue shows a powerful, well-fed official, the engineering mind behind a wonder of the world. When a worker died, he was not discarded. He was buried in a tomb of his own, in a cemetery beside the pyramids, stocked with bread and beer for the journey into the afterlife. Some graves even carry names and titles. This is perhaps the strongest proof of all. Slaves are not buried in honor, in sacred ground, equipped for eternity beside the kings they serve. So who really built the pyramids? Egyptians, drawn from across the kingdom. Many were probably farmers, called up to work during the months when the Nile flooded their fields and farming was impossible. In that idle season, the state fed, housed, and paid them to build for their god-king, turning a yearly pause in farm work into the greatest project on earth. Because that is what it was, above all, an act of faith. To these workers, the king was a living god, and helping to build his eternal home was a sacred duty, one that might earn them a place in the afterlife alongside him. The pyramid was not a prison. It was a stairway to heaven, raised by people who believed in it. And when it was finished, it did not look as it does today. The Great Pyramid was sheathed in gleaming white polished limestone, so bright it would have blazed in the desert sun, visible for miles, a beacon of pure geometry. Most of that casing was later stripped away to build medieval Cairo. We see only the rough stone core. The Egyptians saw a mountain of light. The slave myth endures because it is dramatic, and because it flatters us to feel superior to the past. The truth is greater. Free people, with copper tools, ramps, and astonishing coordination, built a mountain of stone so perfect it still humbles engineers today. The pyramid builders weren't broken victims. They were a triumph, and they were us. Follow Embered Ages for more of the ancient world, brought to life by firelight.